Hi everyone, Jay Egersdorff here, previewing game week 16 on the Fantasy Premier League. What a week it's been. I've personally had a fantastic week. My team is up to 57th overall, which I'm absolutely delighted with. Been inundated with tweets and comments on the channel this week, so thanks for everybody for getting in touch. It's been really good to hear from you all. Going to do a slightly different format this week, so I'm going to chat a little bit about the captaincy choices, and then I'm going to move on. I've got quite a few questions. There's quite a few recurring themes that people were coming and asking me about this week, so I'm going to answer some of your questions ahead of the game week on Saturday, ahead of the deadline, and hopefully that's going to address some of the burning issues that are flying around your minds at the minute. So I suggest, if you haven't done so already, a lot of the stuff about captaincy choices this week will be answered in a podcast that I did earlier in the week with the guys over at Fantasy Football Surgery. So you can check them out on Twitter, ff_surgery is their handle, or their website, fantasyfootballsurgery.com. And in that podcast, I talk a lot about the pros and cons of the different captains this week. Personally, I think I'm going to go with Harry Kane. I really fancy Spurs. They need a result in these next two home games, otherwise they're in danger of really falling down the table. So I think Harry's going to be the man, Mr. Tottenham, the local lad. I think he's going to deliver for them. If they don't, then they're in pretty dire straits, really. So that's the captain bit. On to some of the questions. The FPL physio reached out to me on Twitter and he said, is it time for Sané to go? I've kind of lumped this in with a bit of a, is it time for our Manchester City assets to go? So they've got Man United, then they're away at Swansea, and then they are playing Spurs at home in the next three. So I think if you've got that, maybe two or three City players in your team, it's not a bad idea maybe to switch one of them out. I mean, the Chelsea fixtures are really good. Liverpool, we've seen, are on form. I watched their game on telly last night and they looked absolutely brilliant. I said a few weeks ago about how Coutinho makes such a difference to that team and he's really getting into his stride. Do like Coutinho as a fancy asset. A couple of things you need to think about if you're going to bring him in. He's often rotated or rested and can quite often come off after around an hour or so in matches. And he does have a bit of a not brilliant injury track record, so be careful with this Christmas period coming up. We've talked in previous videos, there's inevitable rotation that's going to be happening. He's the kind of player that I think Liverpool like to put in a bit of cotton wool, 2 or 3-0 up, maybe he comes off and you lose some of those big scores that sometimes you get from the big clubs when they really wallop a team, 5 or 6-0. So with other City assets as well, defenders, people are asking me about Otamendi. I think if you've got no other pressing issues, maybe keep onto those guys, unless, like you say, like I said, you've got 2 or 3 City players, holding down your team. Hector Palmer reached out to me and he asked me about that Liverpool double up. So he was interested in finding out, a lot of people have Salah in the team. Do they think it's worth getting another attacker? I wouldn't really bother with a Liverpool defender if that's what people are thinking by a double up. Liverpool's next 5 include Bournemouth, West Brom, Swansea. Some really good attacking returns there. I like the idea of Firmino. I had him way back at the start of the season. I think could be a good option. Could free up some money if Kane doesn't deliver in the next couple of home games. Likewise, Mane. One of the best players on the game last season, and I probably hazard a guess he's not got massively high ownership at the minute. He could be an option if you're looking for a differential instead of Coutinho. But don't forget that they've got Lallana, Wijnaldum, Sturridge, Solanke, players that could come in, and again there's that small risk of rotation, so just tread a little bit carefully with that Liverpool piece. But I think 2 attackers doubling up in the short term could be a good move. Thanks to Richard Broxton, he reached out to me asking about David De Gea. Is he a good option right now? And that kind of links in quite well with a question that Trevor Lyons asked me on Twitter about the best replacement for Rob Elliott. So I'll talk a bit about goalies. I don't personally like tying money up in goalkeepers. De Gea in the Arsenal game last week, I can't imagine what his score will have been. I reckon it would have been double digit. I didn't check, but he was world class in that game. I think though that it's got to be a bit of a not miracle for him to get that kind of score, but because Man United, in the way Mourinho sets up, they don't concede many shots. Yes, he drip feeds in the 6 points because they keep a lot of clean sheets. But what you've got to ask yourself is, if you had a cheaper goalie and you used that money elsewhere, and maybe that money you'd use elsewhere would be on a player that maybe you'd captain, overall, would your overall figure be better? If that makes sense. So it looks really good that De Gea on paper drip feeds this decent score for you, but could you redistribute that money elsewhere? So in response to Trev's question, you've got a couple of options there in my mind to replace Elliott. I talked last week about Pickford. If you can afford him, he's a little dearer. You've got the two guys at Palace. It's a bit of a conundrum as to who will play given the Hennessy injury, so maybe you'd want to just give that a week to suss that one out, see if he gets back in. But the one I liked, and I did have my eye on, was Aurelio Gomez. Watford have a great run of fixtures: Burnley, Palace, Huddersfield, Brighton and then Leicester. So Gomez, we know, does make a lot of saves. He's got a brilliant track record of saving penalties, so there's a chance there he could get you some points. And those Watford fixtures look great. Likewise, if you need a cheap defender, I talked a few videos back about Kabasele, who I really like, the guy at right back, Kiko Firmino, and there's the chap who's playing at left full back at the minute. His name isn't Zubala, his name begins with Z, and I'm sorry, I can't quite remember what it is. I'd just be careful with him. I don't know where Hollybass has gone. He seems to have vanished. I don't know if he's on the bench, but there's a small rotation threat for me there. The other guy to look at Watford has just come back in the team. He was a regular starter in the last couple of years. It's Prodel, and I think he's down at about 4.2, 4.3. So keep an eye on him. He might get back in. The guy to watch, I'm not sure about Mariappa at 4 million. I think he could be out when some of these guys, Kabul and people like that, get back from injury. So just tread carefully with that one. And then finally, just a bit of a question. I covered this off a bit in the podcast that I chatted about earlier in the video. Rich Corser has dropped me a line on Twitter, and he wants to know when's the best time to make transfers. So lots of action happening, lots of movement in the market, people making their transfers quite early in the game week. So there's two things to consider here. Personally, I like to invest. If a player's value is going to go up 0.1, I like to invest that money in actually knowing and having the data and the team news, being able to make my selection on a Friday night. So it doesn't really bother me if they go up too much. Team value is really, really valuable, but it's a bit like having a racing car. It's great having a really fast car, but you've still got to drive it really well. So it's great having a really expensive team, but you've still got to pick the right players in the right order. So that information as to whether somebody's going to play or you're going to have other headaches in your team that free transfer could address is worth that increase that you might miss out on by delaying your transfer to Friday. Small caveat to that, and we're just about to go into the Christmas period. I think if you've got particularly a captaincy option, so let's say you're going to captain Kane on Saturday, and then you're going to replace him with, say, Kane's probably not a great example because he's the most expensive player. So you had Aguero and you're going to do Kane, and you had the right money to switch it on Tuesday. It's probably, you're okay to do it early because that couple of days in between, players probably aren't going to be doing tons of training, and you're obviously reducing the risk just purely by the time between the games. There's less time for things to go wrong, less time for Aguero to go off to Holland and be involved in a car accident, etc. So they're the caveats. If you need to do it between these tight periods at Christmas, particularly if it's going to be a captain option, go for it. Otherwise, invest your money in time and knowledge. That's what's going to really help you. So I hope that's been valuable. Looking forward to the weekend's fixtures. Keep sending me the tweets, keep commenting below. I've been absolutely thrilled this week. There's been tons of new subscribers to the channel, so welcome everybody. Hope you're enjoying the videos. I'll be back on Monday. I'm going to kind of do a review and a preview for the next game week and hash it all into one. I'm at the Manchester Derby on Sunday, so I can't wait for that. I'll report back on what I think of the players when I see them live in action. Have a great weekend, and thanks again for